And thanks for coming back to What Matters This Week. I'm Lauren Maloney. Joining us now is Professor Daniel Simmons, Assistant Professor in the Department of Political Science of St. Michael's College. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The president's inaugural address on Wednesday, full of healing, full of unity, but a lot of people want to talk policy. What are you looking for in his first address to a joint session of Congress next month?
I think the first thing and the primary thing that everybody's going to be looking at is how are we going to overcome this pandemic? President Biden just today laid out and signed 10 executive orders that are focusing on trying to address the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think that the Democrats just won the Senate by campaigning on ensuring that $2,000 checks are going to be sent out quite quickly, in addition to a tremendous amount of additional aid that states and local governments and businesses and people all across the country say are critically needed. And so I think that that'll be the number one priority for everybody in Congress and from the president is how are we going to start to reach towards normal now that we are able to roll out these vaccines.
President Biden has so much experience in Congress, so much experience in the Senate. Do you think that could be an asset in helping him achieve this unity and this compromise when it comes to getting things done?
I think he certainly hopes so. I think that President Biden is planning to rely a lot on the personal relationships that he's made after nearly 50 years in national government, and is hoping that that personal relationship that he has with many in the Senate, in particular with Republican senators whose votes he would need to overcome a legislative filibuster, he's hoping that that can be persuasive to help to get the bills that he's particularly focused on with the pandemic-related aid over the hump. But I think that one of the drawbacks that President Biden isn't quite willing to acknowledge publicly is the fact that the Senate and the Congress that he's going to be working with is dramatically different than the one that he started working with almost 50 years ago. And it's more polarized and more heated than it was even when he was vice president only 4 years ago. So he's going to be confronted with a lot of different situations. A lot of the senators that he used to work with have retired, and it's not the same Congress that he's used to dealing with. So how much of a benefit his personal relationships will be, we'll have to stay and find out.
Like you say, given what he has to deal with, has a different president ever encountered such turmoil, crises on so many different levels coming into office?
I mean, I think President Lincoln is probably the most obvious, that having to deal with a civil war and with states literally leaving the Union and rising up in armed combat against their fellow citizens pretty much takes the cake. And having this kind of focused civil war affects every range of the government, from the economy to healthcare to just trying to make sure that things function and run normally and operate. And so President Biden's is faced with a whole lot of problems that the country is having to face, some that are internal and some that are external. And certainly the scope of that is maybe more complex than what a 19th century president had to deal with. But I would still rather be President Biden than President Lincoln any day of the week.
I know teaching politics, government probably took on a new meaning under the Trump administration. I'm sure there were passionate conversations that you had in the classroom like none other. So how do you confront teaching now under a President Biden? How much different do you anticipate it being?
I think it will be markedly different for many of our students, in the sense that just being able to be acknowledged as an equal human being again by the government is an important change that shouldn't go unnoticed. So whether it's people who identify as LGBTQ community members or persons of color or women in general, that all of these various groups have suffered some pretty horrific legislation or executive orders from the president that fundamentally has said that at times you shouldn't be treated equally because of who you are. And that change overnight that we've seen with the new Biden administration is important in terms of being able to have a discussion around politics. But one of the things that I'm most proud of that I've seen from my students over the last 4 years is that the overwhelming majority of students have learned how to engage in a deliberative discourse where we want to engage democracy in discussing a plurality of ideas and differing opinions. And we can't have a functioning democracy if we can't have those discussions. And my students have learned to be able to express their views and their opinions by criticizing ideas and not criticizing people. And I think that that's an important lesson that the students have learned and that I hope that they'll be able to share with their family and friends long after they've left college or university.
Professor, let's talk about impeachment briefly. You and I are talking on Thursday. There is some talk that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi could move the impeachment article over on Friday, thus getting things started Monday, basically, with this trial. This trial is so different even than the one we witnessed a year ago, just because of what we're dealing with. But what are you looking for when it comes to approaching the next several weeks?
I think one will be to see how long it takes. I don't think that it's going to take several weeks. If the Senate gets the impeachment articles tomorrow or Friday or Monday and starts the trial, I have a hard time believing that it's going to take more than a week. The Senate in general wants to dispose of this matter as quickly as possible so they can get back to doing what senators do best, which is filibustering and legislating and talking and debating. They don't want to be focusing on an ex-president and whether or not to convict that person. So Democrats have a strong incentive to want to move through this trial process as quickly as possible. So seeing the agreement that Majority Leader Schumer can get with the new Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, and trying to navigate how quickly they can move through that trial process, whether they need to present a full panel of evidence or can they move very quickly to consider the question of conviction or not. I think that that'll be pretty telling on not just in terms of the impeachment trial, but on how likely this relationship between the new majority and minority leaders in a 50-50 Senate will pan out for future legislation over the next 2 years.
I'm stealing a line from another journalist here, and it can't help though be realized that this month really was marred by 3 Wednesdays that dealt with insurrection, impeachment, and inauguration. That said, how will history talk about not only the past 4 years, but this month alone?
I think that's a really good point. But I think it's also not unusual, certainly in the last 4 years or even beyond, at how much news that we're getting on a constant daily basis or weekly basis. Though certainly an insurrection and an impeachment and a new inauguration all in 1 month is pretty unprecedented. So I think history is probably going to look at this from a really interesting perspective in terms of how does this turn out. And we're really at the precipice and the start of this whole process that we don't know what that's going to be. History might look kindly on the actions that are going to be taken by leaders over the next few months, or they might say that it was a huge missed opportunity that led to some cataclysmic outcomes in the future. There's really no way for us to tell, but hopefully we've elected people who are going to make decisions that are good for all of us.
And we're living it right now, so we'll all find out together.
That's right.
Professor Simmons, appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.